For the next 3 months, I'll be posting videos of the same concept. The concept being Scooby Doo holiday episode specials. So I've already done the Valentine episode, so I'm not going to talk about the Valentine episode this time. So what holidays basically fall month after month after month? Well, that's going to be Halloween, Day of the Dead, and Christmas. What I was looking for in order to consider them in this video. Holiday centric. If it's heavily implied that it's the holiday, or people mention it a couple times in the episode, then I will be including it. If the title is referencing to the holiday. So, Scooby Doo Rock and Roll Mystery, not gonna cover that. I have a reaction video on this channel for it. So, I'm not gonna be covering it just because a security camera says October 31st and it said once. So, out of the 18 that I could find, there are 10 in the theme of Halloween. So, this is going to be a long one. So, stick with me. First up, in 1976, in the Scooby Doo show, we have the Headless Horseman of Halloween. The episode starts off with an establishing shot of a house of which is holding a Halloween party. And then it pans over into a fog, showing the Headless Horseman run by. Back at the party, we see Shaggy as a vampire, basically stealing all the food. And then going and dropping it all when he runs into Scooby in a horse costume. Then Miss Crane, the host, checks in with the boys. Scooby Doo appears in the same costume as Scooby. We see Velma as a witch, supporting Fred as a pirate, bobbing for the apples. As Daphne, dressed as a fairy or butterfly, just watches. Shaggy shows them how it's done by using his teeth to pick up the apples. The apple slips off his teeth and rolls away. The boys race after it to get the apple, and then they see the Headless Horseman. Scooby Doo runs off, causing some antics, ripping the costume. The trio catch up with Beth in the library and giving us a history lesson about her great-great-grandfather.
He's my great-great-grandfather, Ichabod Crane.
You mean the Ichabod Crane, who lived here in Sleepy Hollow
Until one dark night, along the road to the cemetery, he found himself being chased by...
And then Shaggy pulls an Anna and Hans and completes her sentence.
Headless Horseman!
Then Scooby explains what they saw outside. Beth freaks out and tells us more about the history.
The whole story is right here. During the Revolutionary War, a tremendous battle was fought right where we are now. In the middle of the battle, the revolutionaries fired a cannon at the enemy and hit one of the bravest Hessian soldiers, taking off his head. They never found it. His headless body was burned in a cemetery right down the road from here. And the legend says that on dark, foggy nights, the Headless Horseman rides out searching for a head, which is why he chased my great-great-grandfather, Ichabod Crane. What happened to Ichabod? We don't know. Nobody in Sleepy Hollow ever saw him again.
They brush it off and get back to the party. The lights go out and he appears saying,
I want a head.
All the guests run away along with the horsemen. The gang stick around and get serious by getting undressed of their costumes. And they split up. Velma, Shaggy, and the dogs take upstairs. Dum scares the duo and Velma shows them it's just a raincoat. They enter our room, the door slams, causing the ball to fall, tricking them once again for being the horseman. Dum does it again.
Like Dum did it again.
Velma says,
You go get Dum and I'll meet you downstairs.
Okay.
while looking for Dum, Scooby learns about reflections. They get chased away by a cloak with Dum under it. As they go to leave, they run into the real deal. And then when they're getting back into a corner, the boys pitch why their heads aren't good for the taking.
Like my head? Oh no, you don't want this bad material. Sloppy workmanship, look. Hasn't worked since the day I got it. Always lose. Doc, you'd be very unhappy with this head.
The Headless Horseman gets mad and accidentally activates the sewing machine, getting himself stuck. The boys take this opportunity to run to the gang downstairs. They go back and he's gone, leaving behind clue number 1.
But he left us a clue. Look, these wood chips. Clue?
Then we see Miss Crane get attacked by a white glove to grab her necklace. Info we get from Elwood, they argue and he walks away. Velma knocks on the wall to open a hollow panel. Dumb gets Sherlocky and presses a button found on the floor and it just summons the butler multiple times. And that butler becomes suspect number 1 due to his hands. But Scooby debunks this by licking his hands, which is just powdered sugar. Elwood returns and argues some more. Crane gives him the necklace and leaves. The horse sounds. Now, Head Horseman with Elwood's head appears to scare them. They find Elwood's car crashed into a tree. Sitting there is the pumpkin head. Scooby-Dum does some deep investigating to find nothing but a picture. Fred notices.
And here's something else strange. The ignition key is missing.
Dum does some more random digging, finding clue number 3, a newspaper clipping that reads,
Flying saucer lands at Beautician's Convention.
They think about going to the cemetery. The boys faint. The butler comes out of the fog and explains,
If you must know, I went to our closest neighbor to have them report our venue.
Why didn't you call the electric company from the mouse?
Because a tree down the road fell over and snapped the telephone lines as well as the power lines.
Oh, so the wind blew it down.
Not really. Somebody jumped it down with an axe.
which explains wood chips from before. They make it to the cemetery and the grave to the original Headless Horseman to find nothing, which Fred thinks is now clue number 5. Fred puts it all together and says,
Come on, there isn't much time.
They go to the airport and set up a trap. The horseman arrives, climbs into a plane. Scooby slips into his lap, and the plane goes crazy, somehow getting Shaggy in the plane front seat. The plane takes off. They get chased to and off the wing and somehow end up landing in the plane again. They fly through the building. Now the horseman is holding on, but not long. The plane flips, having him end up in the same seat as Shaggy. Shaggy manages to get under the plane. The plane falls apart. Dumb catches them in net. They don't unmask the Headless Horseman because it's just hell. What's his face painted pale white? His motive was to...
It was after Aunt Gertrude's diamond all along.
And then they explain their findings.
How did you know it was my cousin Elwood?
The missing car keys were the first tip-off.
When Elwood abandoned the car with the pumpkin in it, he grabbed the car keys out of habit.
And then there was the tiny picture of Elwood that Scooby-Doo found on the end of his nose.
That was the passport photo, so Elwood could fly out of the country. But we didn't figure that out until the butler mentioned that the phone line was down.
Which meant Elwood had to be lying when he told us that he had telephoned the bank manager. Look at the story on the other side, Shag. Apex International Shoe Manufacturers files for bankruptcy.
Oh dear, Elwood's company went broke.
My thoughts on this episode? Wish they could have just stayed in their costumes a little bit longer to keep telling us that it was a Halloween, but also the Headless Horseman of Halloween basically establishes that it's a Halloween episode. And there were some good animation bits. There were some that were like they put the extra money in. Pretty easy to figure out because there was no other person with a motive. He was the only one with a motive. He wanted the necklace, so he... And then there were a lot of bits. Like, there was too many bits. I mean, they had to drag out the episode somehow, so they put in all these bits, but wish they didn't do that. I know it's for kids and everything, so it's to make them laugh so they can be in, so that they can like Scooby Doo. It's because with all the knowledge, with all the jokes, and I would just wish there wasn't as much because at the end, Dumb still is looking for more clues, and he just ends up in the water. And then him pushing the button multiple times didn't have to do that. If they want dumb bits in the script, they'll be like, let's just bring in dumb, because his name is a part of dumb bits. Anyway, now to our next episode. Just a few episodes later, called To Switch a Witch. The episode starts off with a shot of the city, which pans to a cemetery sign, which pans to a guy digging up a grave, and tells us what we need to enter this into the video.
There's gonna be bad luck on Halloween.
Gets scared off when a witch appears. He runs to a character named Marley to warn him of the witch. Then cuts to the gang driving into town. They're here because of their friend Arlene.
Gee, I sure hope Arlene is all right.
Didn't she say what was wrong, Velma? She started to, but the phone line went dead. It was something about Salem and the old family home she just inherited.
Shaggy is more concerned about going trick-or-treating. But Fred's a party pooper by saying,
Help Arlene, and then you two can go trick-or-treating.
the boys compare sizes. Bag sizes, that is. Back with the old guys, Mr. Mooney takes Marley to the cemetery to see the witch. She's still there, and all she wants is
Revenge! I'll have my revenge!
back to the gang arriving at Arlene's. Marley is hanging up a sign with a witch symbol and warns the gang.
Go back! She's been possessed by the witch of Salem!
But Fred says,
We're not going anywhere until we see Arlene and find out what's going on here.
and continues through. They go to the house and Arlene lets them in. Arlene catches them up on what we saw. Arlene is a direct descendant of the witch. Shaggy and Scooby go for some lunch. Shaggy surprises Scooby with a witch costume for trick-or-treating. Scooby looks for a mirror with his eyes shut as he's walking down the wall, but goes to the doorway instead and opens them to see the witch. They do some mirror copy stuff, then realize. And they dive into bed, which is a cabinet also. The others enter, and then the boys explain what they saw. Velma finds clue number 1, which is liquid frying the floor.
This might just be our first clue.
That's my line, Fred. They then look out the window to see the witch heading for the graveyard. Boys stay back with Arlene as the others go after the witch. The wind freaks them out and they decide to join the others. But it's too late, so they gotta take a shortcut through the pumpkins, getting stuck in the process. They all arrive at the cemetery, then she vanishes out of thin air.
Zoinks! Like she vanished in the thin air!
We gotta stop repeating each other. Anyway, Velma finds clue number 2, a warm wire behind the gravestone. Fred points out the symbol, and Mr. Mooney just appears between Shaggy and Scooby explaining the symbol.
It's the mark of Mormo, a witch's sign.
Scooby flings himself off the branch, scaring Shaggy. Mr. Mooney warns the gang. Meanwhile, Marley gathers townspeople and hunt down the witch. The gang arrive at the museum. They take a tour around the room and read about the witch symbol.
This is the sign of Mormo. It will keep a witch from rising from her grave.
Fred finds the Wilcox records with Arlene's info crossed out, besides Gemini, which is clue number 3. While the trio go to Arlene's, the duo go trick-or-treating. Mooney warns Arlene of the mob coming for her. While trick-or-treating, Scooby gets a red cat, Shaggy gets his bag stolen and thrown over him. The gang arrive at Arlene's house to know she's missing and head to the graveyard. The boys see Arlene getting chased by the mob and join her. Scooby goes back for his bag and gets surrounded and taken by the mob. While the others do nothing, Shaggy tells Arlene to go to the graveyard as he saves Scooby and gets taken himself. The duo get tortured. Scooby just gets dunked a couple times. Shaggy rolls away. Shaggy makes it to the graveyard and catches them up. The gang saves Scooby and make a run for it. Back at the graveyard, Fred digs. Girls watch. Scooby and Shaggy keep an eye out for the mob. The witch comes running at them. The mob is also here. Shaggy and Scooby ruin the trap, which turns falling into another hole. Fred helps the witch out and reveals to us
Intended to be a witch to get the inheritance away from Arlene.
a twin.
Her twin sister.
Twin sisters?
Twin sisters?
I don't think this repeating thing is gonna work out for us. They explain the clues.
We realized you had a twin when we found the family record that said Gemini.
Which means twins.
Your missing sister's name had been carefully blotted out.
She planned this witch hoax to scare you out of town forever and take over your estate. This wire we found at the grave came from the wiring Mooney built to make the witch glow.
And that weird bubbling stain we found on Arlene's floor when the witch ran off was acid from the battery she used for the wiring.
And Mooney was paid to help. At first, I didn't know for sure if this was a Halloween episode, so I was just gonna watch it without writing any notes, but the very first line that was said was Halloween, so I had to include it. But if rock and roll was on Halloween, it should count. But it's not heavily implied to be Halloween. Instead of just a security camera saying October 31st, then I might have included it. But they were trick-or-treating in this episode, and they dressed up for Halloween, and they kept mentioning Halloween. I was watching and writing at the same time, so when I did my first repeating joke, like, hey, because Fred said my line about finding clue number 1, and then another time, and then they all repeated twin. I had no idea that repeating was going to be an actual thing in the episode, so it's funny how things line up. Now off to our third episode. 5 years later, in the new Scooby Doo Mysteries, a Halloween Hassel at Dracula's Castle, Part 1 and Part 2. The next episode is Halloween Hassel at Dracula's Castle. The episode starts off with the intro. The group walk down the street talking about Halloween, meaning costumes and treats. And as Shaggy is pulling the treats out of the bag, he's handing them to Scooby, which is a terrible idea because Scooby decides to eat everything. As Scrappy talks about what costumes he wants to be, aliens appear around the corner. The group enter.
A tiny shop of terror. How cute.
The gang look around and meet the store owner, Dracula. Aliens make their way into the store chasing Scooby and Shaggy. And as Scooby and Shaggy are pleading for their life and running under a table mat, the aliens reveal themselves to be Fred and Velma, which I found surprising because I wasn't expecting Fred or Velma to appear in this episode. As Velma is just saying how classic it is for Scooby to go away and hide, Scrappy feels like he needs to defend his uncle.
No way! My Uncle Scooby's the bravest monster chaser and ghostbuster that ever was!
And so Dracula hears that and is intrigued by that, and just says that Scooby is the 1 billionth customer and invites him to a party. The gang drive and arrive at a castle. In the van, we see that Velma is dressed as a witch, Shaggy is dressed as a werewolf, Fred and Daphne are dressed as superheroes, and Scrappy is dressed as a rabbit. And Scooby is wearing that table mat he had on earlier. They go in, and a chest decides to take the coat, which is Daphne's cape, and eats it and destroys it. The gang meet the other guests, and they're all terrified of Scooby for some reason because he's dressed as a ghost. After Fred sees a man become a werewolf, he questions that they're at the wrong party, but as we get down later in the road, they still think they're fake. Velma searches around for her broom, but ends up finding a magic wand instead. He picks up Scrappy, dropping him into a hat. The magician that we later figure out her name is Sandra the Unbelievably Remarkable helps Velma by casting a spell. Velma then pulls a Scooby Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed, and crashes through food table. Scrappy then gets pulled out of the hat and says Bugs Bunny's line.
What's up, Doc?
Igor gets frustrated that he has to work. Sandra is interested in Daphne's necklace, and she thinks it's the Moonstone medallion, which he's been looking for centuries. Shaggy and Scooby see the food, that it's alive, and they run. Dracula stops them, but then As they turn around to run again, they get stopped. But this time, mysteriously. Then the ghost of Van Helsing appears to rid the earth of monsters. And then he disappears, and then the gang realize, these monsters all at this party are real.
What do you mean, we?
We're not wearing costumes.
Even though I thought they already were figuring that out, because a magic broom, freaking seeing a guy transform into a werewolf, and then all those missed weird foods. Here they all run. The invisible man, which closes the door, and they're like, we're locked in. And then part 1 ends when Scooby gets covered by their shadows. Alright, it was actually pretty shocking to see Fred and Velma actually appear in this episode. And I honestly was thinking that this would be a cool, movie. It's just that, why do you have Fred questioning that they're at the wrong party when he literally saw a guy transform and then figure out that it's all real at the end? That was just weird. Seeing a girl actually cast a spell. And another thought I had was that I wish that they didn't do part 1 and part 2. I know they probably just went right into the next episode when it originally aired, but it's weird that they had to split them up on Boomerang. I guess technically onto the next episode, which is Halloween Hassel at Dracula's Castle Part 2. The intro starts this episode off. The episode actually starts off at the last moment from the last episode. They want the gang to help them get rid of Van Helsing. Dracula gives them the rundown as the chest eats Scrappy's snack. Shaggy and Scooby want to leave, but Daphne entices them back with Scooby snacks. As she throws them, they get taken by the werewolf and the chest. The chest is super hungry for some reason. Don't know why. Igor has to clean his face as Daphne tells Dracula that they need to see the ghost's whereabouts. Fred says,
Remember, you guys, keep a lookout for anything suspicious or scary.
as Shaggy turns to have the werewolf find him and is thinking literally what I was thinking after he said that.
You gotta be kidding.
They're literally in a castle full of monsters. Velma, Scrappy, Shaggy, and Scooby, along with the mummy and the werewolf, enter a room. The lights go out. Scrappy flicks on a lighter, revealing that the mummy and Velma are gone. Now apparently everyone's in the room. I thought they were splitting up, but no, everyone's in the room. And Sandra then chants a spell, having her disappear along with the invisible man.
Like, how can you do?
On the invisible man's clothes, there is dirt, being clue number 1. Because hey, where's Igor? Van Helsing appears, having Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy disappear into a dungeon. The wolves start to move in, and Scrappy says,
We gotta find a way out. Sometimes these old castle walls have secret passages.
as Scooby is searching for a way to escape, he finds a hole, and inside that hole is the real Moonstone medallion. Shaggy wishes that they weren't in there. Scooby says, me too, and they appear outside in another part of the dungeon. The trio find Velma and the invisible madman, and then Scooby's second wish comes to fruition when he says, I wish we were with Daphne and the others. Scooby says, me too, and they just appear back with the gang. Dracula explains the medallion. Van Helsing appears grabbing the medallion and giving it to Sandra. And with the medallion, she wants to take over the castle. She uses it, they all run into a room. The gang inspire the monsters to not take the coward's way out. So Frankie gets charged, Werewolf gets more moon, Dracula and his wife drink up some blood, juice, and get red eye. Sandra barges in. Werewolf slips the wand out of her hand. Daphne catches, Van Helsing snatches, and Scooby grabs and runs away. Scooby tries to cast a spell at Sandra, but it only makes it worse by making her grow instead of disappear. She grabs the wand and then she makes the Draculas. They become baseball bats. She makes the werewolf into a little puppy, and she makes Frankie into a wind-up toy. She tries to cast a spell at Scooby, but he runs away. The spell follows him. Scooby runs by Sandra, and the spell goes right back into the wand, exploding it, making her become a frog. And all of her spells wear off. Scooby is still on the ceiling. He falls on top of Van Helsing, and then they unmask Van Helsing being Igor. Igor explains his motive, and it's pretty obvious.
I was just so tired of being ordered around. It was always Igor, sweep up. Igor, rebandage the mommy. Igor, run down to the all-night blood bank and pick me up a six-pack. I was sick of it.
Fred finds the contraption for him to fly around. All the monsters now like Igor out of the blue. They all go back to their original jobs. Daphne asks,
Jobs? But what do you do for a living?
becoming monsters. And then they all run and get chased out of the castle. Fine with that. I knew it was Igor. He was, in the 2 parts, he was complaining that he had to clean the whole time. Like the Headless Horseman of Halloween, I wish they just stayed in their costumes a little bit more. It just gives us a little variation from a normal episode. In part 2, there was no reference to Halloween other than being a sequel to the first part and the title. Next up, from a pup named Scooby Doo, we got Ghost Who's Coming to Dinner. Now, we are in to Ghost Who's Coming to Dinner. A wacky intro starts this episode off. After the intro, it is followed by a title card, which is Ghost Who's Coming to Dinner. And then a jack-o'-lantern jumps at us for some reason. And then we see Daphne as a princess, Fred as an astronaut, and Velma as a computer. And then we also see Shaggy and Scooby as Mary and a lamb. And then they go to a door, not gonna get trick-or-treat, they get candy. And then Scooby and Shaggy run off, come back as superheroes. But then they get pulled away by Daphne. And she says,
"We've already been to this house 10 times.
And then Velma wants to go too.
We haven't been to that house yet."
Scooby and Shaggy are scared because of the Bluebeard's ghost. The girls go and the boys have to join them to protect them. And then they get the attention of Bluebeard himself. And the owners of the house come out and say,
"But we do have a ghost. He lives in the attic."
and the gang are stunned. Bluebeard appears and tries to scare the owners away. Velma finds clue number 1 being a stick of gum. She takes a picture of it, making Scooby go visually impaired. Fred questions it.
Why would a ghost be carrying a stick of gum?
And then Jack the handyman shoots out of the basement. Fred offers their help by holding on to Scooby and Shaggy. We're told that they don't want the help, so they go back out trick-or-treating, and then they get scared off by a puff of smoke. To the treehouse. Then a friendly ghost phases in, and then they run around for a bit. Fred takes off the head, thinking it's
Red herring.
the ghost gives them proof that he's a real ghost by phasing through Scooby and gives him away, saying how he's friendly. The ghost hires the gang basically to clear his name, and he says,
How much is it?
and they say,
25 cents a day. Yeah, and like plus candy expenses.
the friendly ghost gives us the news that if the house goes down, he goes poof, which is actually something that I've heard from Supernatural. So at least they're keeping that into it. They go back to the house to investigate. Scooby doesn't want to go in, but so she offers him treats. Big treats. They go to the attic. The dust in the attic makes Scooby sneeze the cloth right off of the friendly ghost. I think his name is Blue. I don't know. And then he puts on another one. And then Scooby slips on clue number 2, and that is a can of white spray paint. And then they find
Clue number 3. Spray painted chains.
then clue number 4, which is the ghost, walks in and gets dizzy from a flash, and they run. And they get cornered between a window. Velma sees a pulley and a wire, and they all escape. They lose the ghost by him dropping into the cellar, and they show the clues to the owner. Then a rich snob shows up to buy the house, Miss Spelling, and she's the owner of restaurants in Coolsville. Another one shows up, Oh Greasy, offering them fast food and a bucket of chili. Fred says his catchphrase
Hold the phones.
and questions him. The rich get pushed away by Daphne. Velma smacks a clue number 6 on Oh Greasy and snaps a photo. Scooby's super sniffer goes off, and we find a bucket of fries and a trapdoor. The ghost appears and they all dive into that trapdoor and activate a song and chase
From the depths of the ocean blue.
broken up by them finding plans for an office building. Scooby sends him down the road in a box of sorts, and the owner offers the handyman the house. Velma types on herself and comes up with a plan. And this is so disappointing. We had 4 minutes left of the episode, and they decide to get out of their costumes for one big costume, as Scooby and Shaggy are in one costume being monster hunters with a big magnet, and then they show Jack that they suck out the ghost with this big magnet by using blue. Then the ghost appears, having Scooby run, but then gets trapped with the magnet because of the metal chains around his neck. Fred reviews the suspects, all 89 of them. Velma gives us a recap on the clues. We were tricked by the bucket of fries and the gum, and Scooby unmasks it to be Jack. Jack spent years being nice to them so that he could be the best pick to take over the house. And then Daphne kisses Blue. And then the episode ends. I was super surprised when Fred said his catchphrase. In 1988, he said his catchphrase before he had a catchphrase in Scooby Doo and Guess Who. And like every once in a while, the movies will make jokes about him not having a catchphrase, like Samurai Sword.
Jeepers! Jinkies!
Dang, I still don't have a catchphrase.
And Crypto 2, I just watched the movie, but I had a reaction out earlier this year.
Holy Jinkies! Jeepers!
Run?
It's fun, it was cool to hear that. And then I actually forgot that the gum clue existed until Velma slapped O'Greasy in the face when he was blowing a bubble. I already said this, but we were so close to having a full episode of them in costumes, but they just were out of their costumes by the end. So those are my thoughts, and that's the end of that episode. Now we are on to the second best show of Scooby Doo. What's new, Scooby Doo? A Scooby Doo Halloween. Now we're on to what I consider to be one of the best shows. What's new, Scooby Doo's episode, A Scooby Doo Halloween. The episode starts off with an ending of another case, and Shaggy and Scooby are wanting it to go faster because, hey, it's Halloween night and they love Halloween. They wanted to make it go faster mainly.
I know, but if we don't hurry, we'll never make it to Velma's aunt and uncle's in time for Halloween.
Fred enjoys the back. While Fred is worried about Shaggy driving, we learn Kiss is gonna be there. After some Fred rage, they swap. Daphne looks out the window to see a Scarecrow. Our monsters of this episode. And Shaggy likes it because it's Halloween and everything is going to be scary. A mob almost attacks the gang, but Velma's aunt explains why there's a mob.
Someone has been slashing and burning the cornfields at night.
While everyone's chilling in the living room, we meet Marcy, which is going to be the Corn Princess. They are doing this celebration because
100 years of Halloween anniversary.
That's right. And legend has it Hank Manning's ghost is due to show up too.
Hank Manning heard voices and got voted out because they were like, oh hey, he's crazy. But then he was like, I'll come back and prove it to you. So he cursed the town to return after 100 years. After Shaggy walks by a window, lightning flashes revealing our monsters. Daphne goes up to it and just says,
I sworn I saw something big and creepy in the window. It was probably your own reflection.
Daphne gets angry when Marcy crushes on Fred. Marcy shows Fred to his room and says his joke of the show.
Looks like you can bench 220, am I right?
A cat appears to Scooby, gets angry, then scared when it gets red eyes. During the night, scarecrows cut and burn down crops, along with scaring a couple with the fire. At the carnival, we see Scooby making a Shaggy pumpkin, and then Scooby getting scared by Shaggy. Then we see Daphne blowing up balloons. But then she literally blows up a balloon when she sees Marcy and Fred making caramel apples and flirty. Then the mayor walks up to Velma and her uncle just to give us, oh hey, this is another suspect to our list. Then a farmer runs in to warn them. They all rush off, and then the only tracks are the ones they just made.
Tracks here are the ones we just made.
While looking at a scarecrow, a caramel apple gets stolen by a cat. Shaggy and Scooby chase it up the water tower and see the things that were made by the scarecrows. All the attacks are different: a bat, a ghost, and a witch. Fred finds clue number 1, which is a white glove. After Shaggy's question, a creepy lady appears to answer, freaking him out. The gang all meet up at the van, and they think about who could be it. Daphne says,
Marcy.
Out the gate. Then they split up. One group goes to the old lady's house. One group goes to the library. At the house, Scooby eats cat food, and then Shaggy finds the tools for the crime. She and her cat get angry, and then they run out. Meanwhile, at the library, we learn
Food processing plant just outside of town. Seems they've been steadily buying up properties over the years. And the cornfields where the patterns appeared are the last independently owned fields in the area.
And guess who owns the processing plant?
Eldon Reed.
Then Marcy shows up, and we learn it's her birthday. Then an adult joke.
Yep, I'm 18, able to legally vote.
Daphne asks.
Marcy, where were you this morning before you met us in the town square?
Then she answered and shows them footage from security cameras. Shaggy's sad about missing Halloween, and Velma tries to cheer him up by trying to tell a scary story. Scooby scares them with a sheet. Then the Scarecrows come to life and chase them to a locked old barn, saved by Scooby spraying them with water. Then we learn that the Scarecrows are robots. More show up, then go away. They split up again. Shaggy and Scooby become the Scarecrows that they just took out, and then the others are tracking the radio frequency to the robot controller. At the party, the Scarecrows show up. They track the signal to the town hall, aka the party. Then a lion walks up to Shaggy and Scooby. Camera pans to a Wizard of Oz reference. The uncle introduces Kiss, and they start to sing the song for the chase. The lights flicker, then the ghost of Hank Manning appears, and he starts the chase, and then it gets into the good part of the song. Shaggy and Scooby become pea shooters and shoot apples at some scarecrows. Then there is a reluctant werewolf reference. They blind their crows and run. Shaggy gets cornered and Scooby saves him as a superhero. After destroying 2 crows and figuring out that the ghost is a projection, they rush a booth for no one to be in there. Then Velma knows who's behind this. They go back to the water tower to show Marcy. She tells us her reasoning.
Why? Do you have any idea what today is?
Of course, dear. It's Halloween.
And my birthday, Mother! How would you like it if your birthday was completely overshadowed every year of your life?
Kiss walks up to Marcy and is like, so who's gonna pay me? The boys run off and come back dressed as each other. The next day, they leave driving by Marcy and by a cat that disappears. My thoughts? I wished we saw more of the Scarecrows chasing the gang. Because, majority of the episodes, we get monsters chasing them for quite a while. We didn't even get to see an opening with them taking down the fields or anything. I just wish we got to see the Scarecrows a bit more. I also loved seeing an episode start off with an ending of another, because there's a lot of movies that do it. The Courage crossover, Happy Halloween, Trick or Treat, Return to Zombie Island, both Lego movies. From what I know, no other episode does this. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong if another episode does an ending of a crime. Now, onto our first movie of this Halloween review, Scooby Doo and the Goblin King. Maybe. I don't know. We're actually gonna go to the Halloween special that came out on the Run For Your Life DVD that came out back in 2013. Scooby Doo and the Spooky Scarecrow. The short film opens up with a couple in a corn maze. Them and their friends spot the Scarecrow, and they run after we learn that it's
Cornfield Clem!
He slices to our title card. The gang arrive, and Fred sees a town meeting talking about Cornfield Clem. They talk to a local that can only speak in yups. The gang overhear the couple from before and interrupt their arguing. They all go to the pizza barn to get to know about the legend. Daphne doesn't believe it, so the girl shows her video footage on her phone. Then Fred says his catchphrase.
Well, gang, looks like we have a mystery on our hands.
As they're walking and talking about the Scarecrow, a Scarecrow comes around the corner scaring Scooby and Shaggy. But it was just 2 guys in this costume. And so they walk over to a costume store, and the owner also scares Shaggy and pushes Velma in front of him. And then we learn that there's costumes in his store and anyone can be Cornfield Clem. That night at the festival, the boys get corn as the others try to get into the maze, running into the same guy but saying nope and one yup. The two join the trio, showing them a trick.
Isn't that cool?
The officer comes and Fred tries to convince her that they're legit, but she just warns them about the maze. The boys sit down right in front of the Scarecrow. Scarecrow scares them off into the crowd, which scares everyone away. Fred pulls out a net gun. The boys hide in a hay trailer. Fred shoots the Scarecrow with his net gun onto the horse, making it scared and run off. Scooby almost falls out, but Shaggy saves him. The Scarecrow cuts the rope holding the trailer onto the horse and sends them off into the graveyard. We learn that the graveyard guy's tools have been stolen by a tall, skinny fellow like himself. Then as they're leaving, Velma says,
"The cemetery stretches all the way back to the cornfield."
Which means
that Cornfield Clem may have more on his mind than scaring people.
The next morning, there's another town meeting. The mayor tells us that the festival and Halloween is canceled. The mayor threatens the officer's job, and Velma asks about the second calamity, which basically was there was a robbery, we shut down the whole city, and we couldn't find where they went. That night, the town goes quiet, and the gang sneak into the maze. They walk around for a bit. After Daphne trips, they find a hole. Scooby gets a scent, and the gang follow to the Scarecrow in a corn mower type thing and tries to mow them down. The boys run by every cutout, being jump scared on the way. The trio find
The balloon from the festival.
and Fred gets an idea. The boys dive into a hole, dodging the mower. The Scarecrow spots Fred and goes for him. Fred shoots the balloon, having it shoot up into the air and getting into the blades, launching Cornfield Clem out the window along with the money. Cop arrives and Velma unmasks the Scarecrow to be Mr. Yep, or well.
Abner, your hired hand.
And these are the things that they picked up on that we wouldn't have even seen. Like how his hands are too soft to be a cornfield guy. He buried the money in the cornfield. And he did extend arms to be more scary. He says the thing.
For Halloween.
Yep. And I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids and your spooky old dog.
And the festival's back on. The gang are sitting at a table eating with Velma as a witch, Shaggy as Blue Falcon, Daphne as a cat, Fred as a knight, and Scooby as Scarecrow scaring Shaggy in order to get his corn dog. My thoughts. It's been a while since I've seen this special because I totally forgot about the pizza barn scene and also learning about the legend. The Scarecrow was terrifying, like with it kind of looked like it was sobbing in like the eyes. The joke where Fred says, "I like your mask," and he says, "What mask?" It was good. Fred and Shaggy, I think, were kind of dressed as, or were references to their next projects. Like Fred dressed as a knight for Sword in the Scoob. We had Shaggy dress up as Blue Falcon because, hey, he's going to be dressed as Blue Falcon in an upcoming movie, so let's just use that. I don't know, that could just be me just stupidly thinking like, oh, hey, those are references to the next upcoming movies. One more episode left, and that's in Be Cool, Scooby Doo. This episode starts off with a young Fred trick-or-treating with a couple of his friends. They take the path less traveled and stumble upon a house in the woods. They enter and get chased out by a witch. They run to the road, stopping some cops, and they go back with those cops. And the house is missing. Now, over to the present. Shaggy goes over his trick-or-treating round. And him and Scooby dress up as a pocket and a vending machine. We learned Velma hates Halloween.
Seriously, Halloween isn't about candy and dressing up as topical celebrities. The ancient roots of the holiday are tied to the autumn equinox and the Gaelic harvest festivals.
And that Fred doesn't want to go out and do anything. Mainly because
This goes wrong. The ghost of Lincoln is really...
Tommy, I found your
candy. What are you doing, you awful man?
Okay, I'm gonna need everybody to line up in an orderly fashion so I can rip your faces off.
I tell you, the body was right there. You terrible man! How'd you even find me?
Fred sees a kid in costumes of previous episodes. The gang walk by the house, and Shaggy and Scooby want to go to the house. Because it's, hey, not a lot of foot traffic, so they think they can get a load of candy. They get chased throughout the neighborhood. The witch follows the trio, and Scooby and Shaggy get offended and change its mind. They dupe the witch with a cereal commercial.
Just that, I can't believe it's not water.
Wow, is it not?
Didn't stir for exactly as long as it takes for us to run to safety, and voila! You'll say, I can't believe it's not the fear of children, while we say,
I can't believe this worked.
The neighborhood watch comes in and suspect the gang. Fred tells the gang his story with his last encounter with Baba Yaga. But the house from before is from another town. And then Velma tells us,
You know, there's an old legend of a witch named Baba Yaga. She lived deep in the woods in a house that could move around at will on giant chicken legs.
they go back to the house to investigate. They figure out that multiple towns have cancelled Halloween for good because of this witch attack. We also find some clues around there, like
These are ancient books on old magic. Copper, mercury.
Look, this old map.
These marks here seem to correspond with the towns the witches visited. Apples and nuts were often used in ancient divination rituals to help guide future decision-making.
Scooby goes to the cauldron and finds the witch. The house grows its chicken legs, and we go straight into our song and chase. They get all depressed. Fred gets inspired, and then the gang make a plan. The chicken slips on some candy that Scooby and Shaggy threw out, and it slips and falls apart. The witch tries scaring Fred a few times, but the witch gets scared by two zombie Velmas. Culprit is Miss Colin and her husband. Fred and Velma explain their findings.
The clones converted a mobile home adding hydraulic chicken legs to make it appear like a house from old witch legends. I've made similar adjustments to the mystery machine myself. This allowed them to move from town to town easily and set up in a new town, blending in undetected. They would become part of the community for an entire year, establishing themselves in local neighborhood watch programs until Halloween, when they'd reveal their true purpose to end the holiday once and for all everywhere.
Mrs. Clune's witch's broom was ingenious. It was motorized and controlled at the front. They used a special fuel mixed with mercury and copper, which burns green. That created a strange otherworldly flame that would trail behind her.
The broom itself had a hollow handle that could glide along the wires used to decorate towns. That's why the wires near the house had no decorations.
Their motive,
Basically, they hated the crass commercialization of Halloween even more than I did. So
and then they pick out candy, and then that's where our episode ends. My final thoughts here for this episode is that I like how it was Fred-centric, because a lot of episodes are solo independent-centric episodes, because I know Velma is centric. I also know that The People vs. Fred is also a Fred-centric episode. And then I also like how Fred's cousin Scott, I believe, was dressed as his cruise captain, like from previous episode. And speaking of previous episodes, I like that how there was a lot of kids dressed as previous monsters from previous episodes. I know they do that in one other episode. I think In Space does another flashback to older episodes, and I like it because this is the first, this is probably the first and only Be Cool Scooby Doo episode I might do. I don't know, but I like how they animate it to show the viewers what we missed or what we could have figured out. So there you have it. Every single Halloween episode of Scooby Doo. Now, I may or may not do the movies. We'll see. Which episode in this review was your favorite? Which one do you remember the most? Which one did you not know was a Halloween special? Put that down in the comments. Now, in this video, we had 3 witches, 2 Scarecrows, a Headless Horseman, and a pirate. Stick around, because for the next 2 months, I'm going to be doing the same thing, but for the respective holidays in those months. But if you can't wait, watch these 2 videos where I did the exact same thing. And subscribe, so you don't miss out on the next 2 videos coming out on this channel. Peace.